It was dark in the king's room and all the lights were turned off. She took off her ugly skin, and the king saw how beautiful she was and was very pleased with her. But when the rooster crowed, Bisma again pulled off her ugly skin and went back to her house. She would likewise go to the king with her ugly skin in the dark for 4 nights and take it off and wear it before dawn and return to her home. Ayamba of Calabar was a very powerful king. He conquered all the surrounding countries and he killed all the old men and women, but the boys and girls he captured were brought back as slaves and worked in the fields until they died. This king had more than 200 wives but had no children from any of them. Seeing that the king was getting old but still had no children, his subjects married the king among the spider's daughters, begged him to marry a daughter because they always had many children. But when the king saw the spider's daughter, he did not like her because she was so ugly. However, to please his people, he married the same ugly girl and kept her among his other wives. But his other wives objected because she was too ugly and said she could not live with them. So the king made Basma a separate house for him, Basma the spider's daughter, where she was given food and drink like other wives. But everyone made fun of her because of her ugliness. But she was not really ugly, but very beautiful, for she was born with 2 skins, and at her birth her mother had been promised that she would never remove the ugly skin until no special time should come, except at night, and she would wear the same hideous skin again before dawn. But on the other hand, Adiha, one of the other wives of the king, had come to know that Bisma was not ugly but beautiful, and now she was very afraid that the king might not know that Bisma was very beautiful, and that the king would don't fall in love. So she went to a juju man and offered him 200 rods to make a potion that would make the king forget that Bisma was his wife. After much persuasion from Adiha, Jojo Adami agreed to make a potion for 300 rods, and he made some medicine that Adiha mixed with the king's food for a few months, with the effect that King Bisma forgot and would pass by her without recognizing her. When 4 months had passed and the king had not sent for Bisma once, she grew weary and went back to her parents. His father took him to a Jojo man, who, by casting spells and casting lots, soon found out that it was the king's wife Adiha who had bewitched Jojo Adami so that the king would forget everything. So Bisma's father said to Jojo Adami that you should prepare a potion that will make the king remember everything, and he will recognize my daughter Bisma. Prepared the medicine for which Bisma's father had to pay a huge amount. And on the same day, Bisma made a small dish of food in which she put the medicine and presented it to the king. He had just eaten when his eyes opened, and he recognized his wife, and asked her to come to him that evening. So in the afternoon, she went down to the river very happy and bathed, and came back dressed in her best clothes and went to the king's palace. It was dark in the king's room, and all the lights were turned off. She took off her ugly skin, and the king saw how beautiful she was, and was very pleased with her. But when the rooster crowed, Bisma again pulled off her ugly skin and went back to her house. She would likewise go to the king with her ugly skin in the dark for 4 nights, and take it off and wear it before dawn, and return to her home. In time, Bisma gave birth to a son. But what surprised them most was that only 1 son had been born, while his mother had always given birth to many children at a time, usually about 50. When a son was born to Bisma, the king's wife Adiha became more jealous than before. So she again went to the Jojo man, and by giving him a big gift, persuaded him to give him some medicine that would make the king sick and forget his son. And so it happened. And Adeha then took the king to Jojo man, to whom Jojo Adami said, "If you want to be healed, throw your son into the water." First, the king did not want to destroy his son. Then his chief subjects begged him to throw away his son, saying that he might have another son in a year. So the king finally agreed and threw his son into the river. When Bisma heard that her son had been thrown into the water by the king, she was saddened and started to cry. Adia then went back to the man and took more medicine, causing the king to forget Bisma for 3 years, while she was in mourning for her son. She then returned to her father and took some more medicine from her husband, which Bisma gave to the king. And the king recognized her and called her again, and she lived with him as before. Now Jojo, the man who helped Bisma's father Maki, was the water Jojo, and he was ready when the king threw his son into the water and saved his life and took him home and kept him alive. And the boy became very strong. After some time, Bisma gave birth to a daughter. But then Adiha, with the help of her Jojo Admi, persuaded the king to throw her daughter into the water, and the king threw his daughter into the water. And Adiha gave him the medicine, whereupon the king forgot Bisma again. But Pani Jojo was ready again, and when she rescued the little girl, she thought it was time to punish the jealous Adiha for her actions. So he went around among the young men and persuaded them to organize a wrestling match in the market every week. And the water that Ju gave to the king's son, who had become very strong, and being very like his father, told him to go and wrestle, and none could stand before him. It was then arranged that there should be a grand wrestling match, to which all the strongest men in the country were invited, and the king promised to attend with his wife. On the day of the match, Pani Jojo told the king's son that he need not be afraid at all, and that he is so powerful that even the strongest and best wrestlers in the country cannot stand against him even for a few minutes. All the people of the country came to witness this great contest, to the winner of which the king had promised cloth and money prizes, and all the powerful men came. When they saw the king's son, whom no one knew, they laughed and said, "Who is this little boy? He cannot stand a chance against us." But when they came into the boat, they soon discovered that the boy was indeed very strong and good-looking, and all the people were astonished to see that the boy looked like a king. After wrestling for the greater part of the day, the king's son was declared victorious, throwing down everyone who stood against him. In fact, some of his opponents were badly hurt and suffered broken arms or ribs due to the boy's sheer strength. After the match was over, the king presented him with cloth and money and invited him to dine with him in the evening. The boy gladly accepted his father's invitation, and after a good bath in the river, put on his cloak and went to the palace, where he found the chiefs of the country and some of the favorite wives of the king. Then they sat down to eat, and the king's own son, whom he did not know, sat beside him. Adia was sitting on the other side of the boy, who was the cause of all the problems. During the dinner, the woman tried her best to befriend the boy, whom she had fallen deeply in love with because of his good looks, his strength, and the fact that he was the best wrestler in the country. Adia thought to herself, "I will make this boy my husband, as my husband is now old and will die soon." The boy, who was as wise as he was strong, was well aware of all that the jealous Adia had to say, and though he pretended to be very flattered at the advances of the king's wife, he soon did not answer, and went home as fast as he could. When he returned to Paniju's house, he told him all that had happened, and Paniju said, "As you are now in great favor with the king, you must go to him tomorrow and beg his favor. The favor you will ask is that all the country will be called together, and a special trial will be held. And when the trial is over, the man or woman found guilty will be killed by the Igbos in front of all the people." So the next morning the boy went to the king, who readily granted his request, and immediately sent throughout the country to appoint a day for all the people to come in and hear the case. Then the boy went back to Panijo, who told him to go to his mother and tell her who he was, and when the day of trial came, he would shed his ugly skin and appear in all his beauty. Had to come. When the day of the trial came, Basam sat in a corner of the square, and no one recognized the beautiful stranger as the spider's daughter. Then his son sat down beside him, and brought his sister with him. His mother said as she saw him, after that the king and his chief wife arrived there and sat down on their respective stones in the middle of the square, all the people saluting them as usual. The king then addressed the people and said, "I have assembled them to hear a strong applause at the instance of the young man who had been victorious in the boat, and who had promised that if he goes against it, he will present it, his life to the Igbo." The king also said that if the case was decided on the other side in favor of the boy, the other side would be killed, be it himself or one of his wives. Whoever it was would have to take their place on the killing stone and be beheaded by the Igbos. To this all the people agreed and said that they wanted to hear what the young man had to say. That young man then circled the square and bowed before the king and the people and asked, "Am I not worthy to be the son of a chief of the country?" And everyone answered, "Yes." The boy then brought his sister into the middle and held her hand and proceeded. She was a beautiful girl and well built. When everyone looked at her, they said, "Isn't my sister worthy to be a chief's daughter?" And the people replied that she was fit to be anyone's daughter, even a king's. Then he called his mother Basim, and she came out, looking very beautiful in her best clothes and pearls, and all the people rejoiced, as they had never seen a fairer woman. The boy then asked them if this woman is worthy to be the king's wife, and there was a cry from everyone present that she would be a fit wife for the king, and it seemed as if she would be the mother of many healthy sons. Then the boy pointed to Adia, who was sitting next to the king, and told the people his story, that his mother, who had 2 skins, was the daughter of a spider. How she had married the king, and how Adia had been jealous and had devised an evil plan for the king, by which he had forgotten his wife. How he had persuaded the king to throw himself and his sister into the river, as they all knew, had been done, but the water which had saved them both and nourished them. Then the boy said, "I leave it to the king and all you people to decide my case. If I have done wrong, let me be stoned by the Igbos. On the other hand, if Adia has done wrong, then let the Igbos deal with it as you decide." When the king learned that the wrestler was his son, he was overjoyed and told the Igbos to take the wrestler and punish him according to their laws. So they took him to the forest and tied him to a pole and gave him 200 lashes with a whip made of river skin, and then burned him alive so that he would not suffer any more, and his ashes were thrown away. At the river the king then embraced his wife and daughter, and told all the people that she, Bisma, was his proper wife, and would be the future queen. When the palaver was over, Tubasma was garlanded and escorted to the palace in state by the king's servants. That night the king gave a great feast to all his subjects and told them how happy he was to have back his beautiful wife, whom he had never properly known before, and also his son who was the mightiest of all men, and his good daughter. The feast lasted for 166 days, and the king made a law that if a woman was taking medicine against her husband, she should be killed immediately. Then the king built 3 new compounds and kept many slaves in them, both male and female. One compound he gave to his wife, another to his son, and the third to his daughter. They all lived happily together for a few years until the king died, when his son came to the throne and ruled in his place.